Okay, Football for Kids listeners, we have progress. About 500 more people have hit the follow button in the past few days. If you are still not following the podcast on whatever app you listen, please will you do that for me right now. 3 things you'll learn in this episode. Number 1, how Raphinha met Ronaldinho as a youngster and what he said to him. Number 2, which Manchester United player has been a big help and inspiration to his career? And number 3, which Premier League club has Raphinha made history at by just scoring 1 goal? This is the story of the Brazilian sensation, Raphinha. Welcome to the Football for Kids podcast with me, Darren Rees. In this episode, we're going to be speaking about the former Leeds United player, but now Barcelona player who is on fire in La Liga. The Brazilian international, the sensational, the marvellous, the terrific, the fantastic Raphinha. Before we do that, as always, let's do a couple of your shout outs, messages and your reviews. And a huge shout out to everybody who's been sending in their messages to www.footballforkidspodcast.com and leaving 5-star reviews either on Spotify or on Apple and Audible. The first one has come from the website and it says, "Hi Darren, my name is Freddie Hall from Christchurch in New Zealand. I'm 8 years old and I play for Ferrymead Falcons. We had our first season last year and I was voted the most improved player. I want you to do a shout out to all the Falcons who love football as much as I do. I just wanted to write a message saying your podcast is great. I love Neymar Jr. and I love Messi." And that is from Freddie Hall in Christchurch, New Zealand. Well, Freddie Hall, a massive shout out to you and to everybody at Ferrymead Falcons, every single one of your teammates, your coaches, who I'm sure do such a fantastic job, and everybody else you know, and everybody who's involved in that football club. Well done to you for being the most improved player. Keep doing your thing, keep working hard, and make sure you never, ever give up. And the last one has come from Spotify, and it says, "Hi Darren, my name is Isaac and I support Liverpool. Can you please do a shout out to my friends Luke and Ethan? Bye from Isaac." Well, Isaac, the Liverpool fan who left that comment on Spotify, thank you so very much for being a listener of the Football for Kids podcast. A massive shout out to you. And to your friends Luke and Ethan, please keep being a loyal listener to the podcast and tell every single person you know about the show. Right, that's all we've got time for shout outs and messages on this episode. But once again, thank you for getting in contact. Keep them coming in and you may well hear your name on the podcast. Raphinha was born on the 14th of December in 1996 in Brazil. He grew up in Brazil, in what is known as a favela, which is a Brazilian word for a ghetto or a slum. This is where hundreds of thousands of people, sometimes over 1 million people, all live very close to each other. And you have to be very tough to live in a place like this. There is most certainly lots of learning which is done. Raphinha, for some time, had to share a room with his parents, his siblings and his pets. They had next to no money, and that meant that at times they had to ask strangers and neighbours for food because they were hungry and there was no means of getting any. Things were seriously tough for Raphinha and his family in the early days. Many times on this podcast, when we have explored the lives and stories of those who have been very successful in football, on so many occasions, the players have come from seriously tough upbringings, seriously tough areas, and football was an exit out of the world which they lived in. And this is exactly the case for Raphinha. Like almost every kid in Brazil, especially those growing up in those built-up slums and ghettos, football isn't just a game, it's a way of life. People live and breathe it every single moment of every single day. The idea of driving through a bustling neighbourhood in daylight without spotting someone kicking a ball around in a place like where Raphinha grew up is almost impossible. Football pulses through Brazilian cultures, and for Raphinha it was no different. He played wherever he could, on the streets, in alleyways, in makeshift pitches, anywhere with enough space for a ball to roll, the competition was on. It was fierce and the standard was always high. And when you're constantly surrounded by talented, hard-working people, you either step up or you get left behind. Raphinha played, learned and sharpened his skills with every touch, every pass and every goal which he scored on those streets. He grew up in the same area of Brazil that birthed the legendary Ronaldinho. Their families knew each other well, and when Raphinha was just 7 years old or so, he received some life-changing advice from Ronaldinho himself. The footballing icon told him to steer clear of the crime and trouble which was surrounding him. He encouraged him to use football as a way through the tough environment that he and his family were living in. It was advice that stuck with him. It would shape the path he would take forward in chasing his dreams of becoming a future in the sport of football. Raphinha worked hard every day on his football, playing football at every opportunity, getting better and better all the time. He competed in what is known in Brazil as the várzea. In Brazil, they have amateur football competitions which are played in local community places like fields, floodplains and even car parks. Anywhere a pitch and some goals can be put up together. These are very famous in Brazil and have been for well over 150 years or more. The matches and competitions attract big crowds. There's something that communities all come out to watch and enjoy. Many players from over the years who have been successful, who we've seen on our televisions, or maybe if we've been lucky enough to see them live in the flesh, have played in these amateur tournaments in Brazil. Pelé was one of those very famous players, and R9 Ronaldo was another. But here's the thing. Raphinha wasn't just grinding away, perfecting his footballing skills day in and day out. He had something deeper driving him. He had an unshakable desire to make it as a professional and to make a difference in the beautiful game. His inspiration burned bright. His determination was relentless. And his work ethic was second to none. He wasn't just training, he was focusing on his goal. His mindset meant that he refused to back down. Raphinha knew that if he kept pushing, kept believing, and he never ever gave up, there was nothing stopping him from reaching the top. Raphinha had trials at clubs which were unsuccessful, but he didn't let that stop him. He kept going and eventually he was scouted by a Brazilian team. He spent some time there before he was snapped up by a team in the Portuguese Premier Division, a Portuguese side called Vitória FC, and this was back in 2016. By this point, Raphinha was turning heads and making a serious name for himself. Big clubs in Portugal were starting to take note, and it wasn't long before the legendary Sporting Lisbon swooped in to bring him on board. It was here that he found himself playing with the likes of Nani and Bruno Fernandes. The bond between Raphinha and Bruno remains strong to this day. Raphinha often says that Fernandes has been an incredible source of support, friendship and inspiration throughout his career. Bruno hasn't just been a teammate, he's been a guiding light and a true friend in Raphinha's journey. And I think it's fair to say we can all learn something from that. Although Raphinha scored when he was at Sporting and he built great relationships, he wasn't scoring the amount of goals or doing the things that he would have wanted to. And after a season and a bit, he moved to the French top division for just a short period before his career really started to take off. And that was in October 2020, when he was brought and signed by the then Premier League side Leeds United. Raphinha made a bit of history early on, as when he scored his first Premier League goal, it was a goal against Everton at Goodison Park. And that goal was the only goal of the game, which meant that Leeds United won. Not only did they win though, it was the first ever win for Leeds United away at Goodison Park in the Premier League. Before that, they hadn't won there since 1990. But Raphinha had a bit of a thing for scoring against Everton, as in the following season he scored what was nominated as the goal of the season. This lad from Brazil was giving Leeds United fans something to be very excited about. Raphinha ended the season Leeds United's top goal scorer and was doing some pretty special things in the white and yellow colours of the club. But, like always, when you've got a very good player who's making a lot of noise, the big clubs come sniffing around. And it's reported that Chelsea had an agreement to sign him at the end of the season for approximately £55 million. However, the club that he ended up going to, who were very excited to have him, were the Spanish giants FC Barcelona. Raphinha scored his first goal in a 3-0 victory over Sevilla, and since then he hasn't only scored cracker after cracker, but he's been a huge part of the club's recent success, winning the league with them in the 2022-23 season, and in the same year winning the Supercopa de España. And as things stand, this season he is the second highest goalscorer for Barcelona in La Liga, behind his friend and teammate Robert Lewandowski. Not only has Raphinha been performing incredibly for his club, but he's also represented his country of Brazil on more than 30 occasions. So, from the ghettos and slums of Brazil and having to ask strangers and neighbours for food, to playing football on the streets and amateur tournaments, to being one of the biggest clubs in the world's biggest assets, and representing his country more than 30 times, Raphinha is yet again proof that if you want to achieve something and you work really hard at it and you never ever give up, you absolutely can do anything you put your mind to. I hope that you've enjoyed listening and learning about the Brazilian's career and everything he's achieved so far, and I hope that it's given you some inspiration. So remember, if you know somebody who loves football just as much as you do, then please tell them about Football for Kids. And whether you're playing football soon, watching it on the telly or pitch side, I hope that you enjoy the game. See you next time.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
If you're a maintenance supervisor for a commercial property, you've had to deal with everything from leaky faucets to flickering light bulbs. But nothing's worse than that ancient boiler that's lived in the building since the day it was built, 50 years ago. It's enough to make anyone lose their cool. That's where Grainger comes in. With industrial-grade products and dependable fast delivery, Grainger can help with any challenge, from worn-out components to everyday necessities. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.